Crypto.
If you mean crypto like Bitcoin, I've always said it's a fraud.
I do think it's worth looking at this crypto thing a little bit, only because it is a deeply, deeply old-fashioned, simple scam at this point.
Describe it as a Ponzi scheme?
Yes, it's a Ponzi scheme.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Sell my Bitcoin right into this rally.
I care less what Bitcoin trades for, how it trades, why it trades, who trades it. If you're stupid enough to buy it, you'll pay the price for it one day.
It's like when there was the Beanie Baby craze in the late 90s.
MicroStrategy's entire business model is a ticking time bomb.
If you're willing to take a risk in crypto at this point with MicroStrategy's ticking time bomb ticking underneath you,
more money they can raise and then buy more Bitcoin, like a flywheel effect. That's
There's
insane.
a lot of fraudsters and hucksters and scam artists.
Volatility is like fire, and some people run away from the fire, but Henry Ford put the fire into a carriage via an engine, created an entire industry, and he gave humanity wings.
MicroStrategy adding to its Bitcoin hoard. Nobody right now is rattling the cages of traditional Wall Street more than Michael Saylor.
We beat every single company in the S&P index.
MicroStrategy still buying Bitcoin amid the token's record run.
GameStop is considering investing in Bitcoin.
Bitcoin's been a wild run, and boy, have you been right.
That's the brilliance of the engineering. Can a human being make something that other humans can't corrupt?
We are back. Woo! We are on stage here with some of our favorite people, and we are excited to share an hour and ask a few questions and really dive into things a little bit more. So this is the first time we're actually on stage with Michael and Phong, and man, look at all the people in here. Wow, holy cow. All right, this is exciting. So maybe we'll just kick it off. A quick question over to Phong and Michael. So over the last couple of days, you've talked about this digital transformation of investor relations. And prior to, what we're seeing today with this community, the investor relations page was the most boring page on a company's, website, right? Nobody ever went to the investor relations page. Nobody went and, scoured all the documents, but now people are. And people are because we're talking about it. We're talking about this evolution of an equity and how a company can be formed. So I'd love if you can expand on this concept of the digital transformation of investor relations and really kind of dive into that a little bit further.
I can start. The funny thing, and I think Eric Semler talked about it yesterday, about being a zombie company and a company that nobody's interested in. I had mentioned yesterday, we had 40 investors on our earnings calls, 10 of which were employees and board members. The other thing is we had no investor relations person. I was the CFO and I was investor relations. And I remember talking to investors and like, you should really hire an investor relations person. And I was like, to talk to 30 people, it didn't make a lot of sense. And Shirish Jodia, we hired in 2022 to be our first head of investor relations. And I still remember we had two people who were our final candidates. And one person was really nice, super guy from Texas who'd done investor relations for like 15 years. And he had zero knowledge about Bitcoin. And then we had Shirish, who hadn't done investor relations for very long. I think it was like 2 years or so for a local energy company. And he's like, I love Bitcoin. I sought you guys out. I looked you up. I like, this is my job. And of course, Shirish got the job. And then we realized after that, Mike went from like 50,000 X followers to 1 million to 2 million to 3 million, got a huge voice. And we realized that was really the next digital transformation of investor relations in 2023 or so, was to use our X handle. Because, when you have a story that's extremely misunderstood by traditional finance, you need an amplifier outside of traditional finance. We need an amplifier beyond just sort of the way you would normally do things. And so the X handle was the next big sort of really digital transformation of investor relations. And then the biggest gift beyond that is everyone started producing content that we didn't even know we needed, right? Like charts were being created, videos were being created, 10 p.m. sessions of people talking about strategy for 2 hours on end are getting created. And, how else do you amplify an organization of 0 IR people to 1 IR people to 1,000 to 1 million? This is the way to do it. And it's just fantastic. And, you realize that all of that is because we tapped into the zeitgeist of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is what caused the digital transformation capital, but of investor relations. There's no better way to do investor relations than this way. And it makes so much more sense than sitting and talking to, in a converted hotel room in a non-deal roadshow with 4 Harvard MBAs, sorry, CJ, that asked you questions at the age of 27 about your business and want to steer you to go do something like they understand software. That's not investor relations. This is investor relations.
I think we benefited, we were catapulted into a digital transformation by COVID and by the crypto community. And I got to say, we were taken there kicking and screaming. And maybe that's the only way you get there. But as Phong said, the 20th century way to do things is you go meet people face to face. I remember I've spent 1 month flying around the world, and like an entire month of my life, $1 million of travel fees in order to stand in front of 100 people in a room 20 times. And and basically deliver a 1-hour message to 2,000 people cost $1 million. And that was quote unquote best practice in the year 2018. So something profound happened, and when the lockdowns came, you don't get to travel, you don't get to meet face to face. And then you have to do remote, and then you have to embrace something like Zoom. And we used to have, Phong's being generous. I remember, I'm going to tell myself here. I went through a phase when I just decided I was kind of a little bit irked with the investor community. So I canceled conference calls and earnings reports for 10 years in a row. There's a period about, like 40 quarters where we didn't do an earnings call. And then there was when we came out of that phase, we had a lot of goodwill with our investors, obviously not. And then the best practice was sit in a conference room with one of those like speaker phones, and we'd all look at each other, and we'd punch the speaker phone and we'd dial in, and there were like 19 people. I remember 19 to 20 people being on the call, and one of them being an investor. And the other 19 working for the company. That was my recollection. There might have been a couple. So we had that dark period, and then COVID came along and the lockdowns hit, and we went from speaker phones to, 3 different video conferencing things. And then we landed on Zoom, and then we started to have Zoom meetings. Then we tried to have an employee meeting. We realized we had to have the employees join online with a webinar. And so we discovered webinars. Then we thought, well, if we're going to have 1,000, then we started trying to figure out how to sell things to customers, and we had to do that. And so we were forced to adopt technology for customer activity after 2020. And once you get there, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to, well, if we're going to do Zoom webinars for customers, then why don't we do a Zoom webinar as an earnings call and put the video on it? And we evolved from there eventually. And I would say we were catalyzed by COVID. We had to do that stuff. And then, of course, we needed Bitcoin. We found Bitcoin because of the war on currency that came with the war on COVID. And then after that, we were all of a sudden in the arms of the Bitcoin community. And I'm going to say crypto too, although people don't always love when I use the word crypto. But, we're rehabilitating crypto. It's going to be a better word going forward. And the learning from that is this: everybody in the crypto community was launching these tokens, and they were doing investor education on tokens, and they had to do them via YouTube and via Twitter. And so when I got involved with Bitcoin, I saw all these YouTube podcasts, and you would see all the Bitcoin podcasts, but you see every kind of podcast. And then you started seeing all these crypto influencers, and they're reporting on, their favorite crypto token, just like it's CNBC in real time. And, some of them have 500,000 followers or more. So I started looking at what they were doing, and then we realized that you have to go do podcasts. And, we started doing some of these podcasts, and we started posting. I remember when I started posting, I was very clumsy. Everybody, when they first discover when they first discovered Twitter, used to be before it was X, everybody's very clumsy and you do silly, stupid things. And I watch all the newbies come into space and they don't tweet well, and I cringe, and I'm like, don't do it that way. And I remember Samson Mao, if anybody knows Samson Mao, great Bitcoin maximalist, he took me under his wing when I started tweeting, and he goes, Mike, you posted this, there's no social preview. And I'm like, well, Samson, what's a social preview? There's no image showing up on your URL. And I'm like, an image on the URL? He says it's an ugly string of letters. So I got on the phone to my marketing people, like, what's a social preview? Put a social preview on the URL. And so when we got into it, we just started getting educated by the community. This is how you share. This is how you post. Like I even sit with executives today, and I'll say, okay, first you're going to go on CNBC. Then you're not going to not tell anybody. You're going to go on CNBC. You're not going to wait 2 days and post an ugly URL that links to a partial extract of you on CNBC. You're going to go on CNBC. You're going to get your talking points right. You're going to extract a video. You're going to put in an MP4 file. You're going to upload the MP4 file. You're going to write this, right? You're going to post that, right? That's going to be seen by 10 or 20 times as many people as saw you on CNBC. And if they agree with what you said, they're going to grab the handle and they're going to message it to their boss or investor or board of director or whatever best friend, and say, you got to check this out. And that kind of was like a 4-year journey to realize that you have to articulate the message. You have to put on the channel. I remember we got on YouTube, and I would do this interview on YouTube, or someone would interview me on YouTube. And first I didn't know what I was doing. And then I got lucky, and then I got things like the Lex Friedman podcast. And Lex interviewed me for 4 hours, and then he posted it, and it runs like 10,000 times a day. Like the residuals are 10,000 people a day spend 4 hours with me listening to what I have to say many years ago. So you watch that, and then you watch people, they'll post things, and I'm seeing them, they'll interview me on Bitcoin, and they'll post, world coming to shattering end COVID problem, yo-yo dying. And I'll call them, that's going to run better if you put my full name in the title and something Bitcoin, because Bitcoin really works well with the algorithm, and my name will work well with the algorithm. And so I think I went from, I was never on YouTube, I was never on television, I didn't think to post, to stumbling around and making all the rookie mistakes, to starting to learn a bit, and then realizing that the real power is articulate your message, make it easy to consume, put it in different formats. Some people want 30 seconds, some people want 5 minutes, some people want 20 minutes, some people want an hour. And whatever it is, give them the handle, because what will happen is 9 months from now, they'll want to send it to 97 people. And if they can do that in a couple of seconds, your message will spread virally. And don't make it hard. Make it easy. Make it like when you write a paragraph, think people will read the first sentence. When you write a sentence, think people might read the first 3 words. When you write 3 words, obsess over the punctuation of the 3 words, right? That's how I think now, right? And I didn't think at all like that before 2020.
When you think about your equity, and you guys really did something special when you embraced volatility in the market, but when you have a lot of investors, that's often scary for them. It used to always be equated with risk. And one of the big themes that we've seen from the retail community as we've been talking to everybody in the hallways here is that the constant education and the messaging that you guys do empowers the retail community to amplify it further and build conviction. So we've been playing around with the concept of retail being a partner in what we're calling conviction as a service, where you guys enable us with enough information that we can distill, and then we can find ways to communicate that out further to other investors who might be starting from different points in their journey and investing and understanding a type of equity like a Bitcoin treasury company like Strategy. What have you guys seen along the ride as your equity is taking these volatile swings? And I'm sure you guys are seeing all the noise on social media, but what I hope you also see is the people that are the calming voices out there trying to help the retail community understand why they're in this in the first place and what it is that makes this so special. How do you guys see that emerging as kind of a strategic advantage for what you guys have built with your retail community?
You know, it's not lost on us that we hold a 2 hours earning call, and 2 hours later, you know, Jeff gets on X and does an hour and 20-minute dissection of our earnings call and does a pretty darn good job. Because what actually happens in between that is we go and talk to all of our coverage analysts and we do callbacks, right? And we, you know, have a collaborative relationship where we share with them our message, distill it, and they go write reports. And a lot of those folks are here. We appreciate the coverage analysts, of which we used to have one, right? Literally one who had a sell rating on us when we started this journey. And now we have, I don't know, like 50, 12, 13, 14, 15 who all have a buy rating on us. And they do pretty good work and they publish out these reports. And I would guess maybe 100 or 1,000 people read these reports the next morning. You go, don't talk to us, right? Do a dissection that is pretty darn awesome that evening. You know, you could probably, I don't know if you have a wife and kids, you could be doing something else, but you're so passionate about Bitcoin and about strategy. We don't pay you. We don't ask you. You don't ask us. And, you know, it's awesome work. And you get 10, 15, 20,000 people that watch it that night. And it's awesome. I mean, and so, yeah, like there is the structural relationship and there is the unintended relationship. And the unintended relationship is 20 times better, 100 times better, 1,000 times better. And I do think it's a calming voice out there amongst FUD, but the FUD has decreased. And so, like, this is the way it should work, right? And more people who do this work, and you do it because you're passionate about the company, right? I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool.
I think I'm inspired, you know, by, I mean, the early juggernaut in my career was Microsoft. And the late juggernaut in my career is Bitcoin. And if you're looking for a commonality, it was Microsoft made room for their partners, and Microsoft was successful because just about every techie company on the world, on earth, could build something, build a product, build a service, and work with Microsoft. So they made space for the partnership and they respected their partners. And I think with Bitcoin, right, the success is it's decentralized and everybody can choose to engage with Bitcoin in whatever depth, technically or economically or intellectually they wish to. And I think that's informed us. So as we built our company, we wanted to make space for our partners and create a community, and it's very, very clear that we can't do everything. Like the best marketing isn't done by employees of our company. The best education is done by our customers on the product, by our investors on security. And you just see, endless examples of that. I used to tell our investors on the road shows, I said, our objective is to stay in our lane. We're not going to compete with you. We're not going to do it if you can do it. We're going to do the things you can't do. So our job is to create the security, buy the Bitcoin, hold the Bitcoin, and do that in a credible fashion. You could almost say the most valuable thing in the market is credible, durable, high-performance volatility. And a lot of people have figured out how to create non-durable volatility or non-credible volatility, credible maybe non-transparent volatility, or low-performance volatility. But creating high-performance, transparent, credible volatility is what makes us a success. And when you understand that, you realize that there's a lot of investors who are very long 30-day call options. And so they have a particular view. Their world ends in 30 days and they want up. They're constituents of ours. There's another set of investors that are very short 30 days. They looking down and their universe ends in 30 days. There are the out of the money long call option people. There are the long dated equity people. There are convertible arbitrageurs, and on any given day, they're either buying our stock hard or they're selling our stock hard, but we're in business with them. There are big people that hate Bitcoin, and whenever something bad happens, they want to put a short on it. They short us. And let me tell you, if you gave me a choice, would I rather have them short my stock or short somebody else's stock when they're mad at Bitcoin? The answer is I'd rather have them short my stock. I never want them to lose faith in the fact that I am double long, and I want them to think that they got a 2-for-1 short. So you got all these people out there in the community, and there's someone that needs to be told why it's a good idea to short our stock when you're hating on Bitcoin. And there's someone else that needs to understand how to sell volatility, and somebody else wants to buy the volatility. And you have the long equity investors, and then you have preferred, and you have convertible bond investors, and then you've got the options traders, and you can never forget, for everybody, you read a lot about on X about people trading options. For them to trade the options, someone at Susquehanna or someone has to create that market. So there's a market maker creating that. And it turns out that, there are incredibly powerful forces in the market. They're all doing their job and they're very good at it, right? Like, you want to know how good they are at it? Just take a stock ticker out, take a Bloomberg or take a TradingView or anything, and then put on your screen Bitcoin, IBIT, MSTR, and track it minute by minute, second by second, and watch the correlation and ask yourself the question, who's making all those things hop, like in synchronicity, amplified in a certain way? And I think that the point really is, you think you know the investor, you don't know you think you understand how the market works, you don't, right? The point at which you understand when you realize you don't understand. Like the market's much bigger than any of us. And so the takeaway from that is humility, right? You have to allow for lots of participants. It's a highly decentralized market. There's so many conversations going on every day in every direction, in all polarities, right? In all languages, everywhere in the world. Yeah, the company could never hope to be able to meet every need. And, our bias, Phong and I, our bias is naturally going to be long long the equity, with a secondary objective of making sure all of the credit instruments are fairly valued, right? That's how we think. Fair to the credit counterparties, but our job is to make MSTR go to the moon. That's how we think. But, and here's the conundrum, for us to be successful, we actually need people in our ecosystem that don't believe any of that stuff and have the exact opposite point of view. They're the ones making the market on the other side of the trade. And what I learned early on in my career is the fate worse than death in the capital markets. It's not for them to hate you. It's for them to be disinterested in you.
So Bitcoin started as a peer-to-peer network. It is a peer-to-peer network, but it's also now becoming an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem full of Bitcoin treasury companies, lots of vendors and service providers, ETFs, other products. And the retail audience is definitely picking up on this and tracking it and amplifying it. How helpful is that, and where could it go over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think great ideas spread via word of mouth. And every retail investor, no matter how much or how little money they have, is no more than one step or maybe 2 steps removed from someone running a public company, or someone running a multi-billion-dollar portfolio, or someone running a state, or someone running the cabinet, or a country, or a cabinet department. I walk into a hotel and a 20-something guy will walk up to me and say, "You have to talk to my father." Well, and his father turns out to be a mega billionaire, right? And he's the retail investor, and his dad's not invested. But I have to tell you that all these retail investors, they're all indirectly or directly driving our culture, and of course, all it takes is maybe 2 iterations before you've gone from insignificant to being 20% of the market. And then once you're 20%, it's unstoppable. The entire world flips. So I think it's incredibly important, not to mention the fact that it's refreshing talking to retail investors, because there's a certain honesty and candor and enthusiasm. So I guess ask, and they bring out your best performance. Take any rock star and ask them, would you rather play to a music festival full of 20-somethings, a third of which are jobless, or would you rather play in a nice, elegant tent of a billionaire at his charity ball for 300 of his rich, elite friends? And the answer is they would do that one for free. And this one, you have to pay them quadruple. And they come in and they get off the stage, right? And so I think we do it for the people, the masses, right? You're not going to change the life of the institutional investor. You're like 2% of their portfolio allocation going to 200, up 20 basis points. And they've been trained to be very, very measured in their communication. But when someone walks up to you and says, "Hey, you changed my life. I retired. I bought a house. I got married. I had a kid." You meet someone, they say, "Yeah, I was able to move to the Caribbean and I lived there permanently because of you," right? That's much more motivational, I think. So if you're saying, why do you do it, right? Well, you do it in theory to make the world a better place, but, you like to make people money, but you really like to make retail investors money because it's their money. Whereas when you're making the institutional investor money, it's going through 3 layers before it eventually ripples to a nameless, faceless, institutional, whatever organization. It doesn't have the same emotional appeal.
Yeah, I'm surprised more public companies haven't embraced social media generally. and X specifically, right? It started with athletes and musicians said, well, I want to get out to my fans, and rather than go through a publicist, I'm going to go direct to them. And technology provided a way for do that. Politicians, rather than going through a PR person, said, I'm going to reach out in a public town square like they used to do and go talk to their constituents. And what better way to do that than via social media? It's the same concept with investor relations and corporations who are really funded by the trust primarily of retail and institutions. Why wouldn't we get out to our retail shareholders via the same avenue and skip and bypass the middleman? And the answer, the reason why more aren't doing it is because of friction, concerns, risk, legal, because it makes total sense, right? And it's not even just in a Bitcoin community. I think if you want to access your shareholders, this is the way to do it. And Mike's right, it just feels so much better. Like, trust me, like none of our institutional, holders, and they're awesome, are coming up to you at an event with their wife or husband and saying, you changed my life. No one's saying I was able to have more kids because I invested. Like, nobody on the institutional side. And that's just, it makes you feel good. It's inspiring. Why wouldn't you do that? And I'm sure that happens to athletes and marketers and influencers and politicians. It's such a great forum to get outreach to folks. And Bitcoin amplifies that. But, you asked this question, like, I love what True North is doing, the digital transformation of investor relations. Like, our advice number one is buy Bitcoin and put it on your balance sheet to any corporation. But if you're not going to do that, at least use social media to get out to your investors. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? And as a retail investor, why wouldn't you want to see the raw representation of the executive team that you're investing in versus the extremely filtered, curated, prepared remarks at, Mike's got some guts here, right? Like, when I joined 2015, I still remember, right? Like, I was CFO and IR guy. So I wrote the earnings script and I would read the script that said basically nothing. And Mike would just go ad lib the thing, which people don't really do. And then I remember once we were like, hey, Mike, I'm going to give you some bullet points. And he's like, okay, yeah, I'll take your bullet points. He went completely off script. And then after that, I was like, well, I'm going to just write you something. And he didn't read any of it, right? But that's sort of how this should work. Like, you don't really want to hear the scripted, prepared remarks that were recorded 1 week in advance to the earnings call. That's not a investor relationship, right? You want to hear the raw remarks, the raw emotion. And that's what the retail investors want to hear from someone they're going to put their life savings into. I think it makes complete sense.
So you guys have created these new novel products that the market has never seen before, right? Strike and Strife, and people are beginning to see the value of these products. And, we've been trying to track what's going on there and how these can potentially change the world of finance. And so I kind of got a two-part question. What can we as True North do? And what can everybody else in this room as an audience that's kind of experiencing this do to help? Where can this potentially go? What do you see this looking like in 3 to 5 years? How does it change the world of finance so we can get there?
Yeah, well, I would say a lot of the energy in the Bitcoin community has always been about how do we fix the money and how do we explain to people why Bitcoin fixes the money. And I think that's been going on for 15 years, and there's an incredible amount of really good content there. What people, I think, misunderstand about our mission at Strategy is we're not here to fix the money because Bitcoin did fix the money. We're not even so much trying to convince you that Bitcoin works. I think we've crossed that inflection point. I think when the President of the United States, created the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, and when David Sachs says Bitcoin is digital gold, I think it became clear that the establishment has accepted the idea that Bitcoin works. We're here to fix the capital markets. And so here's the mission. The mission is $100 trillion worth of equity based on future expectations of currency derivatives, of broken companies operating broken currencies, or weak companies operating on weak currencies. And our suggestion is you can create new equity based on a sound money, and strong companies can actually grow those equities and compete against the Mag 7. That's hard to understand, right? So there's an entire world of equity analysis. How do you value a company based upon digital capital and based on sound money as opposed to based upon traditional 20th century business techniques? And then in the credit markets, we want to fix the credit markets, and that's $300 trillion of credit instruments, bonds, preferred stocks, convertible bonds, sovereign debt. They're all based upon future expectations of cash flow of weak to failing currencies that are issued, securities issued by weak companies without assets, with weak business. Which companies do you think are there, right? There are weak companies issuing credit securities valued on future expectations of cash flows that are coming to you in a currency which is collapsing in value. They're not good securities. They don't yield much. The credit's not great. They're not liquid. They're sold in an antiquated fashion. Most preferred stocks, most corporate bonds are sold over the counter, one and done, short duration. They don't have tickers. You probably can't name a ticker, name a ticker for a corporate bond issued by a major bank in the United States. Now, major banks in the United States have issued hundreds of billions of dollars of fixed income instruments. You ever wonder why is it that a major bank has never issued a fixed income security that you can trade? Right? They're sold through a sales force. How many things, they're sold through a sales force that's 50 years old. I mean, the idea is 50 years old. They're people. They have CUSIP numbers, right? There are numbers like something 199742. And then there's another issue, something 19743, and you can't get the quote unless you pay $25,000 a year to get the Bloomberg, and then you can get the quote, and then there's no market maker, and the spreads are 3%. And that's because why would you ever trade them? What? So that's the state of the credit market. And so we're not here to fix Bitcoin. We're here to fix the capital markets. Now, fixing the capital markets means going to people that buy preferred stocks that are illiquid, that they're holding, waiting to die, right? They're waiting for them to whatever expire, and going to those people, they don't even know they own the stuff, and they're getting 100 basis point spread above SOFR on garbage, and explaining to them how they could actually get paid 700 basis points above SOFR with a better credit instrument, right? And how is it that our converts can do 60% and the average convert index is 4 or 6, right? Go find, but the unlock is finding people that don't even know that don't know converts exist, and then of course, the market, it's structured. You have the SEC 33 Act, the SEC 40 Act. You have so many rules, and when you decipher the rules basically just cripple the market. They cripple the market, they cripple the distribution channel, and traditional conservative or conventional actions cripple the securities. And so, what can you do? I think it's a educational campaign to the investors of the world to show them, there are more than 100 equities, or maybe you can consider more than the Magnificent Seven. Here's some new equities that can outperform the Magnificent Seven. Let me show you what they are. That's a renaissance in equity capital markets. And then there's a crusade. Well, here's some credit instruments that will give you yield for your retirement account. And they actually aren't risky, not nearly as, you don't even know how to get them. You don't know they exist, but someone invented an electric flying car with a nuclear reactor in it. You don't have to refuel once in a lifetime. You can buy that. It's cheaper than the normal car. But someone told you that it's dangerous to have a car with a reactor in it, right? So I think that the rate at which the capital markets evolve, it's really a function of how rapidly ideas disseminate. And I think that's a function of just how adept and nimble and facile the educators are in the market. And I think there's an opportunity for everyone to get involved. And of course, the more people that get involved and the more effective the education, the faster we transform the market. The question is, how fast can you grow? It's really a question of how fast can the capital markets absorb a new idea. And if there was one 60-minute podcast you could distribute that just solved it, then you would just let it run, but there isn't. There's a lot of work to be done in educating and helping people embrace new ideas.
As everybody knows, strategy issues equity at the market when it's proper to do so and accretive. Is a shelf necessary for success? I mean, we see Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin treasury companies coming to market in a fashion where they can't have a shelf for 12 months. Is a shelf necessary for success?
I think you can, if you gave me a public company that was a cash cow that couldn't issue equity, but it generated cash, it would have extraordinary success just sweeping its cash flows. Here's my list. I take a company, I take the cash on the balance sheet, I convert it to Bitcoin. That's a success. I take the cash flows, I convert them to Bitcoin. That's a success. I take the dividend, I convert it to Bitcoin. That would be a success. I take the buyback program, I turn it into a Bitcoin buyback program. That would be a success. I don't take the company private, but I do an LBO where I lever up the company. So I basically pledge the cash flows, raise private or public debt, buy Bitcoin. That's a success. I take a company that's got a slow growth business that's struggling, and they sell off that business or do an M&A transaction and take the proceeds and buy Bitcoin. You've swapped a zero growth business that you sell at 1x revenue for a 60% a year growth business that you buy at 1x revenue. Would you do that trade? Right? Yeah. You could sell this business, pay 30-40% tax, and buy Bitcoin. You would still be better off by a factor of 100 over the course of a decade. So you can take a business that doesn't have access to equity, and you can do all sorts of capital markets transactions. If you're a private company, many of those things are also available to you. And of course, you can also work your way down the credit instrument ladder, where you could sell forward contracts of your products. You could sell a subscription to your product, roll that into Bitcoin. You could sell convertible preferred. You could sell straight fixed preferred. You could sell junk bonds. You sell convertible bonds. You could do bank financing. The world is full of people that found endless ways to do it. Warren Buffett, one of his secrets is he bought insurance companies, right? And insurance companies had investment portfolios, and then he was able to invest those portfolios in securities. Well, the trick is the operating company can't hold the security, but this insurance company, has like one layer, and they get like a waiver, and they get to invest in securities. So he found a very elegant way to grab a float, but the trick is not getting the float. The trick is being able to invest the float, right? And so what if you get control of one of those insurance companies and you reinvest the float in Bitcoin, right? And of course, there's a million compliance and regulatory issues you got to work through. But I can imagine 100 different strategies that you could pursue to sweep cash into Bitcoin, and a lot of product changes to the way you run a product business or definition of a product that would enhance the product. You could, for example, build an insurance policy where, you invest the premiums in Bitcoin and use it to increase the payout on the back end and grab market share. Or you could cut the premiums in half because you're invested in Bitcoin and grab market share that way. And so what you can do is a function of what kind of company you are and what jurisdiction you're in and what kind of entity you're managing. But, again, Buffett showed you that where there's a will, there's a way. And, you have some people that kind of they want to do the simplest thing. They're like, well, I can only do this and this, and so that's what I'll do, even though I'm going to fail. And there are some people that don't want to fail, and so they'll think a little bit more creatively. And, lest we forget, the greatest investor of the 20th century, his success story starts with buying Berkshire Hathaway, which is a failed textile mill. So it starts with a failure. And he just simply decided, even though it's a total abysmal failure, he's going to turn that into a shell company to become a great investor, and he did that. And I think that every single operating company in the public market is in the same situation now. Every private company is in a situation. It comes down to will. Do you have the will? And do you have the courage?
So I've got a really important question here. You guys did something very unique as a company, particularly at this conference, which is you took a bunch of people that streamed from their basements at midnight on a Wednesday, and somebody convinced you guys it was a good idea to let us have a room and host our own conference here. So first, whose idea was that? And then the second one, because you guys have become such fan favorites in the retail community, you might be the only person on earth with a personal digital artist around him. How weird is this for you?
I think it's definitely Fong's idea you're here. So you
You're loving Phong.
But it was my idea to retweet you. But we work like that, which very often the way it works out is I see something which I think is amazing, beautiful, extraordinary, compelling, novel, and I amp it, and he sees it, and he operationalizes it in the business. So all of the execution is him, and occasionally I nudge him, and then occasionally he has a good idea too.
Look at the idea of Bitcoin. A lot of these ideas, they sort of. There's a lot of gut instinct to an idea. Like when we decided we were going to do Bitcoin for corporations 4 years ago, I was like, hey, Mike, should we do this? And it's like, yeah, of course. It's not like there was this long debate of, is it a good idea? When somebody came and said, should we let True North host an event within an event within an event? It might seem crazy, but it was obviously a good idea, right? Those are the easy ones. Right? Like when Mike told me we should do Strike. Well, when Mike told me we should do Bitcoin, that took a little bit of work. Strike took less work. Strife took even less work. By the way, back to your question about how you can help more than you already have. I don't think people understand Strife, and I don't mean how it benefits us, right? Which I think we've explained fairly well, and you've explained fairly well. I don't think the retail community understands the benefit of a 10% coupon bond that lives into eternity that you could buy in the NASDAQ, right? I have some neighbors down the street who are in their 60s or 70s. I haven't asked them, but they bought a house for $500,000 as an investment. and they, they cleaned it up, they redid the yard. We're pretty happy about that, and they rent it out at something like $3,000 a month. And so get $36,000 a month on a $500,000 investment. I'm sure they took out a mortgage. Let's say it's about 3% or so. And almost every year, the tenants turn over. And when the tenants turn over, that house sits vacant for about 2 months. And, when the plumbing doesn't work, the guy shows up and cleans, goes in there and fixes the toilet. Right. And anyone who's ever fixed a toilet before, it's not fun, but that's what he does, gives him something to do. And that is the traditional way for people, who have some wealth to make money off of their wealth. The other way is to get 2.5% on a T-bill. Or the other way is to buy some mix of something that you don't quite understand. Like, go tell people, you basically, instead of doing all that work, the hobby of buying a house, because that's the traditional way to make money off of your money, go online, put STRF in, put 500, whatever amount makes sense, and collect your 10% forever. And I don't think people realize how novel an idea that is versus all the alternatives out there. Like that buying a house is hard. Renting it out is even harder. Maintaining it is even harder. There are many better ways out there now. And if you can help explain that to folks, right, that's a great option, in addition to the equity. And other companies should be providing something similar.
Yeah, on that subject, normally if you want, if you look at that instrument, you're paying like 600 basis points more than SOFR. Normally you want super high yield. You either have to take massive credit risk. You're looking at distressed debt where you're in anxiety, or you have to take you have to take a lot of credit risk on a short duration instrument that will be called or repaid in a year. With Strife, you're getting something that you could hold for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You could gift to your granddaughter, right? You can hold it for 100 years. And if SOFR comes in, if interest rates come in, when you have a very long duration instrument, a 10 duration instrument trades up 20% when the interest rates drop 2%, right? And if it becomes more creditworthy, it could trade up 20, 30, 40, 50% when it drops, right? So there's capital upside on one hand, but the other thing is when you buy these other short duration things, when interest rates drop, the companies just refinance them, they pay them off, and you lose it. So it's very hard to find high fixed income yield in a creditworthy package that's transparent. And we don't need to I don't think we need another Bitcoin educator group, because people have been working on educating for Bitcoin for 15 years. And I don't think we need, maybe we can always do with some equity education, but the fact is $5 billion a day gets traded in MSTR. So it's pretty clear that it has massive awareness. The things we've done, I think, that you could feel it in Phong voice, and me too, I think we're most proud of, are creating Strife and creating Strike, because we use the energy in Bitcoin and the volatility in Bitcoin in order to create one instrument, Strife, which is just a much higher grade fixed income for people that want it. Just a better maybe arguably it's the best high yield product in the world. I don't know. I don't really think that there is another instrument that's a perpetual 10% plus floating listed preferred stock that's 5x over collateralized. I just don't think you'll find anything like that in the world. I've never heard of it. So we think we've created something which is akin to, the nuclear-powered hover car, right? And that's cool. And the world doesn't know it yet, but I think everybody's going to like the idea of something which has double the performance that lasts for 30 years on one can of fuel, right? And I think with Strike, what we wanted to do was create something that gave people Bitcoin upside with downside protection, principal protection, and a guaranteed coupon. So a lot of people are scared they don't want the roller coaster of 100 vol, but they're scared to death of 50 vol. And if you say, if you go to the average person on the street, you go to them and you say, well, do you want to invest your, retirement account in Bitcoin or IBIT? It comes from a good company, BlackRock. They're like, well, I just hear it's too volatile, right? The talking heads on CNBC think it's too volatile. And they're like, well, and I need money to live on. Well, what if you get an 8% dividend and you get principal protection and you get a conversion rate, which works out to be like 35-40% of MSTR, which can work out to be 80%. It could be 80 to 100% of Bitcoin. What if you have the potential to get 80 to 100% of Bitcoin and you get the guarantee and you get the downside and it's over collateralized and it's liquid? Well, that's kind of like Bitcoin with guardrails. Actually, Bitcoin with guardrails with a living stipend, right? I'm going to give you the Bitcoin vehicle. I'm going to give you a stipend, right? I'm going to put rails around it and I'm over collateralize it 5-to-1 or something. The creation of those instruments are to onboard a massive class of normal investors that would just like to live happily ever after. Right. And I applaud anybody that's going to live happily ever after because they took the plunge on MSTR, but that took a lot of conviction. And the way that we grow this market is we provide the best credit instrument for the most skeptical fixed income investor in the world. And they come in, and then we find this great Bitcoin middle instrument for the normal investor that simply can't handle the G-shock of the fighter jet, when it pulls up, because we pull the stick hard sometimes, And in fact, of course, if you listen to us on our earnings call, right, the torque, or to your credit, fully torqued Bitcoin, the investment proposition of MSTR is we're going to make it a double, triple, fully torqued Bitcoin, right? If it's a 2x Bitcoin, I'm sitting around trying to make it a 4x Bitcoin. And if someone walks in and says, I have ways to get it, from here to here to here. And when I think about it, I get kind of excited. I'll say to Phong, if we do this and this and this, we could get to 3x Bitcoin volatility, maybe 4x, right? So and there's a group of people for which volatility is a beautiful word, and they get, the Jeff Parks of the world, and they get very excited. And there's another group of investors that for volatility is a dirty word, and most of them are sitting on CNBC and they're conditioning the mainstream audience every day. And so I think the real key for us, and of course the great irony is the way that we're going to create, the way we're going to be able to pull 4 Gs on the MSTR jet is we create Strife and Strike, and their brothers and sisters, and then we grow that business, and that is an educational campaign, because we have to introduce a new idea, a new security. No one's ever seen it before. 50 years in the capital market. Nobody wanted to hold preferred stocks because they were all garbage. So now you've got one that isn't garbage, the not garbage one. Yeah. Now we have the not garbage one, right?
I think Strife is a better name than not garbage.
Yeah, that's why we went with that. He keeps me honest. Sometimes I get too excited. Yeah.
So you've got an entire room here full of a lot of retail investors that are very excited about everything you're building, everything you're bringing to the markets, all the ways you guys have invested your time in educating them and really teaching new courses in what finance looks like, even in people's personal lives, with all the new products that can get integrated. What's the one thing you would want to say to the retail community that you would really like to stick with them?
All good things flow from Bitcoin.
I don't think I can say it any better.
Yeah, we're on a new frontier of digital capital. You guys are blazing the path. We're hanging on. It feels like we're hanging on the outside of a rocket sometimes, right? I mean, holy moly, fully torqued is right. Yeah. So I guess I've got one more question, and part of my presentation a couple days ago was about the evolution of like the equity market, right? And it's primarily been a function of how fast data and communication can transmit between people, and we're now seeing this increase exponentially, right? We've seen some mania with the GME, and information is moving incredibly rapidly. And we're also seeing the advancement of intelligence, right? And a lot of this conference has been about the advancement of AI and intelligence. How do you see that changing in the next year or 2 years with communication flow increasing incredibly rapidly? Does that what exactly does that look like?
The William Gibson quote is very apropos at this point. He's quite brilliant writer, and he said, "The future is already with us. It's just not evenly distributed. The future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed." What you have is heterogeneous future shock. Ideas and technologies and protocols are rippling through the global economy everywhere, in every different way, but they're manifesting themselves differently on different organizations, different entities, different individuals. And there's a natural rate at which ideas can propagate, but they propagate through various fluids at different speeds, and they have a viral effect. I mean, think of it as any kind of virus. It infects some people and they shrug it off, and others become super spreaders of it. When I was as an engineer, the metaphor it is very powerful in my mind is a shock wave. And a shock wave forms when you have an airfoil moving faster than the rate at which the air can get out of the way. So the speed with which air molecules communicate to each other has a common term. We call it the speed of sound. But it's really the rate of communication of molecules of the air. When you're slower than the speed of sound, you have subsonic flow. It's very easy. It's pretty efficient. When you actually breach that speed, it's like you look that way and I slug you in the back of the head with a baseball bat. And if you're looking at me and I swing the bat, you duck. So if you're looking at me and I'm communicating fast enough, it's just a trivial joke. But if you're looking away from me, I take your head off. And so that's why you don't travel supersonic. Right? That's why in 50 years, we can't figure out how to create a supersonic passenger jet, because it's so much more obscenely expensive and turbulent to breach the speed of sound. I think you got to think about the idea of ideological shock waves, like this week, a Bitcoin strategic reserve bill vetoed by a governor in Arizona, That's an example where it's going too fast and the governor sees no merit in the idea, shuts it down. And then a Bitcoin strategic reserve bill signed by a governor of New Hampshire, right? So what you're going to see is all these ideas, you're going to look at them and you're going to say, well, this is a great idea. It's pretty obvious every family, right, should adopt this. And it's going to be like, no, hell no, of course. I'm going to quit my job and tell the next 100,000 people this, right? That's how the idea will spread. And you'll say, well, why doesn't everybody react rationally? Well, you have a heterogeneous market. Everybody has a different attention span. They have a different set of prejudices and biases and a local set of information and political preferences. And the way you know you're succeeding, right? When, the central banker of whatever country says, we've decided not to adopt Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, that means you're succeeding, right? When, in your video, when bankers that run large banks say, I hate it, that means you're succeeding. And the reason you're succeeding is because it's a new idea. It's a shock wave. It's propagating. Everybody's getting asked the question. They don't want to answer the question. They don't want to address the issue any more than the air doesn't want you to go faster than the speed of sound. And what happens when you break the speed of sound? You get a sonic boom, right? It's very loud. And so the screeching is indicative of the ideological velocity and the rate at which it's spreading. I think you're just going to hear lots of screeching. Lots and lots of screeching about all these things, and it would be a mistake to interpret the screeching as negative feedback. When you hear the sonic boom, that means you succeeded as an aeronautical engineer, right? That's a success. And when you get the sonic boom in the capital markets, that also means you're succeeding. That means that everybody in the world is forced to embrace, right, and react to a new idea, and there hadn't been one for 100 years.
Speaking of airplanes, 3, 4, 5 years ago, you often said Bitcoin adoption is going about as fast as it can go without breaking something. Do you still feel that way? Or is there a chance that Bitcoin treasury companies can pull that future forward? Nation state adoption can pull that future forward?
Well, I still think it's going as fast as it can go, but I think the Bitcoin treasury companies are every Bitcoin treasury company is a motor on the network, right? Torquing the network, right? And so as they get bigger, they're going to get exponentially more powerful. MetaPlanet is getting exponentially more powerful. Similar is getting exponentially more powerful. We are getting more powerful. Right. So I think that they're part of the dynamic that's going to drive the market. But, my thought is it should be growing 30 to 60% a year for the next decade. And, my long-term forecast is 30%, 29% ARR over about 21 years. So I haven't changed my view on that. And I think that everyone that gets involved, you are a driver. Right? Everybody in this room is a driver. Every company that adopts Bitcoin is a driver. Every time a politician advocates for it, they're driving it forward. But you know what? Every single time a politician blocks something or reacts negatively to, they're driving it forward. Right? You can't pay for the marketing we just got in Arizona. Right, that's going to catalyze millions and millions of people to say, well, what is this thing? Was that the right decision? Right? Should we reevaluate this? So I think that everything is good for Bitcoin.
So Strategy is the company whose phone is always going to be ringing as new companies start to enter into this market. What sense are you getting that this is really accelerating at a much faster pace than people are thinking?
I think a year ago, there was us, and then Saylor and MetaPlanet, which are companies with an operating strategy that adopted a Bitcoin strategy. And really, that was just a year ago, right? Came out and said that they were going to adopt a Bitcoin treasury company strategy. And now we're up to 70 companies. So if you extrapolate that out, that means that next year, right, we could be at 700 companies, right? And I think, look, success breeds interest. And we're at a time when there is just a lot of uncertainty in the economic environment, which causes companies to ask themselves, how do we create value for our shareholders? And if they go out and they just say, let's look at the top 15 companies in the world last year, number one is Metaplanet. Semper follows somewhere in there, and I think we were number 14, right? Like, you would think that that would cause people to be interested. I think the other piece is a lot of folks talk about the Overton window and what's happening with the U.S. government and the embracement of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, digital asset framework, stablecoin bills. We have an administration who's very supportive of Bitcoin. It makes everybody wake up and say, hey, what is this Bitcoin thing? Right? So I think we're early, but I think the acceleration is real. And I think, from last year to this year, right? We held this conference last year in Las Vegas. I think there were about 50 to 100 attendees. This year we're at 300 attendees. And I think in this room, there's probably 400 interested folks, right? Next year, maybe we'll have 1,000, right? So I think the acceleration is absolutely real. It's exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard to beat Bitcoin, so join it. Or talk about the company that's, buying as much Bitcoin as humanly possible. And hey, perhaps we become a Bitcoin treasury company and maybe we go public and we start being one of those machines in the wheel. Yeah. So, I think we're at time. Should we wrap this up? Should we do final thoughts, pass it around, just like a True North call? Yeah. Maybe we'll start with you, Ben. Some final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, my final thoughts are just being at this event this entire week has just made me so hopeful for so many people, because the number of people out in the halls here talking about the impact that just a single equity and the entire ecosystem built around it has had on them, it shows that the information we share and the way that we share it makes a real difference for people in their lives. And it's one of those things that makes me very hopeful that more people are going to get on board with this mission, and they're going to push forward with telling all the people that they love about what it is they're discovering. This is life-changing stuff for a lot of people, and it's just been so amazing to meet so many of you. And all of our lives have been impacted by Mike and Phong, and this has just been a really amazing experience. So I'm really happy to be a part of this journey.
Maybe you, Tim?
Yeah, all of this reminds me of what you posted when we did our programming. We had, I think, at least a dozen, maybe 15 or 20 different countries in the room, and to have those conversations in the hallway with people coming up to you and saying, hey, I flew 16 or 20 or 30 hours to come see you, to come see Jeff. That really leaves an impact. So we really appreciate the support. And we're literally, right, the community power that we talked about on Monday, that's everybody in this room.
Yeah. Maybe over to you, Phong.
I want to thank you guys for what we've done, for not just strategy, but for Bitcoin. And I've expressed this sentiment before, but I feel it more now than usual, than ever. What's great about Bitcoin is because it represents freedom for a lot of people, it attracts some pretty cool, good people, right? Like, you can't say that about every technological revolution, every capital revolution, every digital revolution. I've met some amazing people here. I've met some amazing people over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's the sentiment that I don't think most people get, right? And being in the room here, you get it. Being around people and but like, it's just, you guys are great dudes, right? The folks out here are good, cool people who care about their country, about the world, about the economy, and about freedom. And it's just an awesome feeling to be around people who are just good, honest people.
All right, Michael, I'll leave you for last. I'll go, and we'll let you close it out. So some of my final thoughts, I met a ton of incredible people being here. Some of my final thoughts are really trust your gut, right? I think a lot of people are probably feeling a gut feeling in their room, being around so much energy. This is the innovation. This is the most innovative company in the planet right now, and I think it's very apparent being at this event for the last 3 days. So trust your gut and upgrade the world, right? If you see an opportunity, take it. I mean, I left my very comfortable traditional financial job and to take a bit of a risk and explore this. And I mean, here I am. I never would have guessed that I would be on stage with you guys. I mean, this is incredible. So thank you. And upgrade the world. So appreciate the time, everybody. So over to you, Michael. Final thoughts.
Well, I want to thank you guys for setting this up. For those who are listening to this on the live stream or future recording, I just want to say I'm sorry you can't be with us here because the energy at this conference is electric. I've been to a lot of conferences in my life. I can say that I've never seen the electricity, the hope, the optimism, the enthusiasm that I see here at this conference, in this room, in this community at this time. And so it reminds us why we all come back together again, and the value of coming together. And then I'll just end with the thought, I said all good things, they all spring from Bitcoin. Bitcoin is hope. And the beauty of Bitcoin is that we're able to create better equities, better securities, better products, better services, better communities, better governments, better protocols, better plans, better strategies, better philosophies, better politics, better everything, right? It just injects a better spirituality and sense of optimism into the world. And I think anybody that doesn't understand what I mean when I say that, I would encourage you to block out 100 hours of your life and go down the rabbit hole and try to figure out how this can be beneficial to you, your family, your company, your community, your institution, your country. I got to say, I'm just incredibly energized and by the community, by each one of you. It's an extraordinary privilege to be on this journey with you. Thank you for your support.